an obvious point clearly in the digital environment, in that the more sophisticated we are, and people have their iPads and mobile phones and God knows what else, that whilst it's all becoming frictionless, there's people are excluded because they don't have an iPad, or they can't pay for broadband, or etc. The list goes on. And that I'm sure it's not the case, but there's always the risk that, of course, that those frictionless services are provided for the better off rather than everyone. And of course, access to finance is a fundamental human right, and it's important to ensure, from an ESG and vulnerability perspective, that there's equality there. I think, though, that there should be encouragement and education around the digital ID, because if we do this well, they should maintain trust in it. I do, this is obviously a contentious point, but for example, where I live, the physical banks are closing, and my own view, and people may not agree with this, but I think the best solution often is still a mixture of analog and digital. And I think there is a risk if we go 100% digital, that we do potentially risk damaging those like the infirm, who still go down to the high street to get this and that. They still like, look, I want the digital ID, but actually I'd like to do it in an analog kind of way, even if actually we know that may even be less secure. That's not the point. It's still the perception of it. And I think the second point I was going to make was, from a digital ID perspective, it does give us the ability, hopefully, to have more accurate analytics, assuming people are happy to share it from a anonymity perspective, because I know there's some great things being done by like Smart Data Foundry and other research institutes in the financial services sector, who are really giving a sort of advanced warnings in and around what the trends are, advanced warnings and predictions of people having threats of the credit they have, the mortgages they have, and then being able to act on that early, and actually sort of identifying which people in which regions sort of have those challenges. And I think there's obviously a privacy issue there that needs to be tackled, but I think having that information that can help provide support to those individuals could, I think, be reinforced and supported by a universal digital ID.
I've just got a couple of points to add on to the great points Philip's made there. And when I approach the topic of inclusion with digital identity, recognizing that there may always, unfortunately, be edge cases, but the strive is to make us it an inclusive, as inclusive as possible. And the first kind of thoughts that I have around this are always centered around, actual access, which Philip touched on there with the analog still being a preference for many people. And, there's some fantastic innovation happening in particularly within Europe at present, to have spaces where those individuals that want more of the analog experience can enter into a branch or a post office or wherever it may be, and use a machine to create a biometric based credential for themselves, which can then be popped into a digital wallet and essentially give them the ability to open a bank account or something if they are perhaps an immigrant, for instance. I always really think about the optionality here in the choice for customers. Some customers' preference might be this bank-based identity solution. We know from reports in the FCA that there's currently around 1 million UK citizens that are unbanked and therefore automatically excluded right now from a bank-based digital identity solution. And then on the flip side, with photo ID or document upload solutions, you have an estimated potential 10 million that are unbanked, and the regional potential differences there. Perhaps there's a greater population of individuals within London that have access to photo ID versus a small county elsewhere or a small town elsewhere. So there's lots of thoughts that kind of go into this inclusion play, but giving consumers the optionality or the choice in the identity solution that they want, I think is increasingly important. And I do think that's where the UK's trust framework sets us up really well. Obviously, choice to a certain extent. We don't want to see checkout screens, for instance, in e-commerce worlds with 100 different options for identity. But against each, kind of theme of document-based identity, credentials, or bank-based identity, or biometric-based identity, it would be great for the consumers to be able to choose the one that suits them and their needs best.